introduce yourself and tell everybody, who you are, what you're from, and obviously you'll have a couple different bands and stuff you can talk about. So,
Okay. My name is Eddie Flowers. I guess I'm here because of the Gizmos. There's some Christmas thing that Gulcher Records sent me in this direction about. So that would have been what that was my connection to that. Although that's not really true in a way because I was in the Gizmos back in the 70s. The Christmas Nerds thing. I guess we're going to talk about that. Is that right?
we're just going to talk about you.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Alrighty. Anyway, I was gonna say is on that I was in a band called Crawl Space in LA. Um, so yeah, I was in the Gizmos in the 70s. I was in LA for forever. Had a band out there called Crawl Space. Been in Bloomington now since 2018, and here I have a band called Heavy Mother.
Our editor loves you guys.
Oh, cool. Right on.
And I know that you've kind of been around the Indiana scene in general, with your new band and then obviously with the Gizmos back in the day.
Right.
Um, you've met a lot of pretty cool people too during that time, right?
Oh, sure. I mean, I was my period in Indiana was like on and off from 1974 to 1977, and I never lived here. Weirdly, I lived in Alabama, and I would just come up and do stuff and go back home. And I was a kid, I was a teenager. So the last time I was here between 1977 and 2014. I mean, that was the gap. So what's 37 years? And
Yeah,
that was to come back to do the first Gizmos reunion stuff and
that's
10
awesome.
10 years ago. And then I moved here in 2018. I was in LA for 39 years, so pretty much
But
my entire adult life.
yeah. So what brought you to music from the start? Where did you come to
Oh,
music from?
that's a big question. I What I always kind of say to people is like I was a little kid in the 60s, and so like rock and roll and just music it was like it was just in the air in a way that people your age cannot possibly understand. It was just I don't know. It was in everywhere at all times. And I grew up in a small town in Alabama. There was no bands, there was no live music, there was no alcohol. It was a dry county. I mean, it was, but there was rock and roll, on the radio and on TV, and I had an older brother who's 9 years older, so he didn't have a lot of records, but because it was the '60s, they were all good. I mean, it was easy to have good taste back then. So
Uh,
I really got into music really early from just what was around me, and like I started buying records when I was 10, so in 1967. So by like the early 70s, I was kind of a connoisseur. I had developed really weird taste, and unlike anybody else around me. But I was attracted to that, and I wrote. I was always, even as a little kid, I wrote stories or wrote whatever. And then I started reading rock magazines. It's like, oh, I can write record reviews. It's like so easy, and I started doing that. And 1970, right around the time I turned 13, there was the beginning of a little boom of rock and roll fanzines. It was the beginning of it. It was Greg Shaw in LA. Or actually he was still in the Bay Area back then. But it started, and then just like within a couple years there were just people all over the place doing this. And a lot of them were younger people. He was older. He was like a true 60s guy. But the people that followed in his wake, a lot of them, I mean, I was 14 when I started writing for fanzines, and I was not the only one. Although these are people spread out like all over the country, and almost nobody knew anybody else. It was all through the mail. It was just letters and fanzines. So somebody does a fanzine, you write for it, and you do a fanzine, they write for you, and maybe 50 people ever even see it. But man, it was really important. I mean, it was something I guess a lot of people maybe understand now, but it in many, many ways, it directly led to punk rock in the US because
Yeah.
it just it anticipated a lot of it. The writers were like just anxious for like a return to kind of basic rock music after, things getting kind of bloated and prog and everything in the early 70s. So it was very natural, and looking back, it's very exciting. I kind of lived through it, even though I lived through it in my bedroom
Yeah.
until I started coming up here when I was 16, and then eventually, you know, getting out into the bigger world and going to LA, New York, and wherever.
I think that's such a special time that you got to be a part of too, and I think a lot of, um I'm 36, so,
Yeah,
I grew up my mom is your age.
yeah,
She
okay,
I was lucky enough to get her and my dad's, records, and so I grew up listening to, the same music that they did because that's what we had access to. We didn't have,
right,
like,
right, right,
money to go buy new ones or anything, and, I think it's cool because that's honestly how, we found the Gizmos was because, a lot of kids my age really liked what their parents liked, but then they wanted more, so
yeah,
once it started to become, um, available out in the internet world where you could just go
right,
out and, hey, I want to find this thing, from this era of time, or that's kind of, we all
right.
stumbled on, some different, more
Well, I
punk
mean,
rock, I would
I mean
say too.
that's the reason I'm here again is because of the Gizmos. I mean, it was it would be a weird place to end up, honestly, from Los Angeles to, but I when I started coming here and doing shows and started meeting people and realizing like even if they haven't actually heard the music, like everybody here knows about the Gizmos. And it's like, wow, this is makes it really easy for me, to establish myself here, and
Sure.
people sort of know who I am, even if they really don't.
Right.
So man, it's pretty beautiful. So and I was in a bad situation in LA, so you know, I've told people before, like the Gizmos kind of saved my life because I was living very low and living in shit basically for quite a while, and I started coming back here and doing those shows, and I was like, oh wow, this is amazing, and yeah, so here I am.
So how did that happen? How did you end up becoming the Gizmos? How did everything get started with that?
It was through fanzines. There was a guy named Bob Richard who ran a did a fanzine here in Bloomington. I think he started in '73. It was called Beyond Our Control. And me and this other teenager, Kenny Highland, who lived in upstate New York, we both were already writing for fanzines. And just through the network, because even though there was a fair amount of activity, there wasn't enough that you couldn't keep up. So
Sure.
you kind of knew what you knew what was out there. So we both saw his fanzine and started writing for it. And so yeah, just a year after that, Kenny graduated in '74, and then he hitchhiked from upstate New York to Bloomington. Then he and Bob Richard, who ran Gulcher, who's is the reason we're talking right now, uh, they drove all the way down to Southern Alabama, picked me up just to go back and hang out here in Bloomington. And I was 16. I was like, this is insane. I had never been away from home on my own. And so it was really great. And then from there, me and Kenny hitchhiked to Chicago, and it was an adventure. And then anyway, so we did that, and then I went back home. And then the next year in '75, Bob was at this point had done a couple other things besides Beyond Our Control. He was a really good businessman. He was a good guy making things happen. And he decided to start a magazine, like a more professional level magazine. And that was called Gulcher. And I was invited to come up and edit the first issue. I sort of had some material for a fanzine that didn't happen. So I had some kind of leftovers, and then I just started asking every all the writers that I liked if they would write for us. So I got Lester Bangs and Richard Meltzer,
Love it.
Mike Saunders, who later formed the Angry Samoans, Cub Coda for Brownsville Station. So it was pretty wild, you know. It's just, and this is all for free. Nobody's getting paid. And so did that first issue, which is like, it didn't have that big an impact. Nothing from here ever has much of a big impact anywhere else. It just, Indiana gets lost in the shuffle pretty much always, you know. So it's very odd, you know, because I mean, the first issue of Gulcher came out like probably 6 months before the first issue of Punk magazine in New York City. But of
Mm,
course, there was no way for us to possibly have that impact.
right.
I mean, also because they were covering a scene and we were covering stuff we liked that was, there was no scene.
That's fair.
So anyway, so Gulcher happened, and then the next year in '76, Kenny, who was the other teenage guy who wrote for Gulcher, um, he was sick of rock music. So he decided he was going to join the Marine Corps, which he did. But before that, Bob wanted him to record a bunch of his songs, and Bob was like, "I'll put them out. I'll put out a record if you do it." And Kenny was like, "Okay, let me put together a band." And he just started asking people he knew, and that was the Gizmos. I had never been in a band. I'd never sang in front of anybody.
I'm sorry.
Cool kitty.
He said hi.
Yeah, hey there. I like kitties. So anyway, I mean, it just kind of happened in a weird way. I mean, Kenny's just like, "I'm going to do a record. Do you want to be on it?" And it's like, "Yeah, of course I do." And he and I had already kind of wrote a couple songs. Well, we had wrote a couple songs, me with words and him with music, and so yeah,
It just happened organically from there.
it was a very strange thing. I mean, most of the band, the people who actually played, were from Highland, Indiana, which is up near Gary. So
Okay.
they drove me down. Of the on the original Gizmos, the people who were on the record, only two of them really lived in Bloomington,
Okay.
and Kenny was only here for a year. I never lived here until 2018. So I kind of like it. Like the first Indiana punk band, like some of us weren't from here, and almost none of us were from Bloomington. So you know,
But you're here now,
and
so you must have liked it a little bit.
we weren't really a band. We played no shows. The record came out, and then because the record did pretty well, uh, really because it was so early, and it was right as things were starting to break. You know, it came out not long after the first Ramones album. We'd never heard the Ramones when we did it because you couldn't unless you're in New York, you know.
Right.
So it's just at a perfect moment. So Bob sold out of like a couple thousand of them just through the grapevine, and it got reviewed in Cream magazine. And
Nice.
so a year later, he said, "Well, let's record
It
another
helped
record."
that you knew Lester, right?
Yeah, well, that's how we. Well, I was in touch with Lester just through the fanzine world.
That's
When I
super
was
cool
like
though.
14 or 15, I was writing for this fanzine from Mississippi called Boogie. And Lester saw it and told the editor, "It's like, hey, that kid's pretty good. You should tell him to send some stuff to Cream, and I'll check it out." It never happened, but I corresponded with him for a bit, and he would always like, "Yeah, well, we can't use it," or
It was
this.
your almost famous moment. You're almost
Yeah,
famous.
yeah, like, almost famous, I guess. So yeah, never met him, but I knew him through the mail for a little while there. He was really excited when the first issue of Gulcher came out. In fact, I heard through whoever it was from that he was like on the phone in the office, the Cream office, like kind of ranting and raving. It was like, "This is what Cream should be. We've already sold out, and this is like the real deal." And it's these kids in Indiana, and nobody even knows who they are. Not that that amounted to a lot in the long run, but although it may be why we were reviewed in Cream when the record
Yeah.
came out. I mean, it was just it was a pretty small world of rock writers and fanzine writers that just 1977 the floodgates opened and there was too much of everything. But up until that moment, it was like it was a pretty small world, and you know, it was. I kind of miss it in a way because as great as punk rock itself was, it was like it was it was a lot easier to do stuff and and get attention before everybody in the world is trying to do the same thing.
Well, that's interesting that you say that because that's something that I often bring up and ask. Is with everything that you've seen change through the years and everything that you've watched the industry grow and go through, what do you see for the future of the music business, or what do you kind of think is going to happen there?
I have no idea, but it's I don't know. It just seems to get worse and worse. Honestly, I think the scene in Indiana was better before the pandemic, and it may be just because I'm not getting out as much as I was when I first got to Bloomington. But it's like it just seems in Bloomington itself, there's definitely not as much going on as
You should
there.
come up to Indy
Oh,
because
look,
we have a lot
no,
going on.
I'm up to I'm up to India a few times a year, but
Yeah.
and of course there's more there. Just it's a big city, but see the thing in Bloomington is like the scene. Like if there's like 10 people doing it, there's a scene, and when
Yeah.
those 10 people leave, which they almost always do, because like at least half of them or more are IU students, and they either graduate or quit, and they go somewhere else. The scene here is very unstable. It changes every 2 or 3 years, except for, and this was true when I first came here in 1974. Like fake hippie country music and bluegrass will never die in Bloomington. It is what brings people out.
They like it, right?
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean,
and
I
I love
always
real.
say it's not, even
I
if it's
love
not for me, it's for somebody.
I
Uh,
love real country music, but this ain't it. So, but it almost doesn't exist anymore, and I don't know. I good luck to all bands and all musicians, but there's nothing going on at the moment that I'm excited about. So
well, I really hope that maybe we can change that because I think there are some
maybe,
amazing bands that are actually coming out of indie right now,
yeah.
that I would personally like, say they're gonna be something or go somewhere. And
I don't
not
even
that that means anything, but
I don't even care about that. Most of the bands that I've liked the most for the past 40 years, like most people don't have any idea who they are. I mean,
that's fair.
my favorite band in since like the mid '80s is Sun City Girls. Do you know who they are?
What did you say?
Sun City Girls.
I feel like I have heard that
Yeah,
actually.
but
Is that
yeah, you don't really know.
I don't know it. No,
And they're a
and I'm
band.
I'm
They're a
pretty
band to me. Like they're a band to me. Everybody on the planet should know who they are, but almost nobody does. So they don't exist anymore. But you know, uh,
well.
but
See,
yeah,
I
yeah.
I make a
But
point of
so I guess that's what I'm saying is like how many records you sell or who you play to. I don't care. I just care
right.
what it sounds like to me personally, and that's kind of how I've been. Like yeah, for about 40 years or so. I mean, it's
I
just
can
I just
agree
think
fully
I
there.
think I think just what's popular has just increasingly become worse and worse and worse since like I mean, kind of always, but not, especially from like kind of the end of the 70s. Through the end of the 70s, there were still big bands that I liked. I usually didn't like them as much, maybe, as like a more underground band, but they were there. There's nobody now. To me, I mean, I'm sure maybe there is to you, or maybe I'm sure there are to lots of people, but they don't mean anything to me. So I don't.
I'm not so much
I could
into
care
like
less.
newer music, and if it is,
Yeah,
it's local bands that I think are actually good, and I'm like, oh, you
yeah.
guys
It,
are
it,
good.
it's just everything's generic. I mean, I mean, there's there's nothing new. I mean, and I don't expect there to be. I mean, I honestly, I think this is the culture we live in. I think we're a culture that's like in many ways, we just run out of steam. It's just there was so much music and art and movies and all kinds of stuff produced in the 1960s. I mean, in the 20th century, that like it's almost inevitable. Like that's not just going to keep going, and it hasn't. I don't.
Sure.
I can't think of anything from the 21st century that I think is actually innovative in terms of music or art or music. I mean, technology, absolutely, but that's not my thing. So, I mean,
Well, I think that's generally a pretty punk rock attitude to have anyway, 'cause, I mean, you're not here to be impressed by anybody anyway,
yeah,
so
yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, yeah. Somebody was something came up the other day. I can't remember what it was about, but it was like somebody was trying to write something about me, and they were like calling me a forever punk or something like that. It's like, yeah, but you don't understand. Like, I kind of hated punk rock after about 1983. So yeah, it's like, no, I don't, there's no label that I'm comfortable wearing, So,
I feel that.
I mean,
I
in a moment, yeah, like my current band, Heavy Mother, it's a rock band, but I don't really like when people call it punk rock because there's elements of it there, but it's not,
I
so,
would I wouldn't have called that. No, I would say Gizmos, yeah, I would say punk rock, but I would say
yeah.
with your because I checked out what, you sent me in
Oh,
a
okay, cool, cool. Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
yeah.
no. Rock I think is just that umbrella term,
Yeah,
right? So it's kind of like the safe place to be.
it's so vague that it means nothing, which is good. I mean, yeah, in terms of there being a label at all. So, which
Yeah.
I understand there has to be, or you can't write about anything if
It
there
makes
aren't.
music writing a little difficult now
It,
because
it,
everybody is this like 47 word description of what they are. I'm
oh,
post
oh,
retro industrial punk. Like you're like,
uh,
holy crap.
oh, I
But
know all the supposed subgenres of everything are. The metal world is the mind blowing one. I mean, I don't care really. I haven't cared about heavy metal since like Black Sabbath and Led Zeppelin. But when you see these charts of like all these different metal, it's like, okay, all these bands can't be that distinct.
a lot of the time the font is what gets me. I'm like, can we just like not share
Oh,
three different fonts for every metal band?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Or like
Like,
that, or the
but
kind
they
of
do have some pretty epic names.
I like kind of some of the death metal logos where you can't read it. It's like
It
I
just
mean,
all reminds me of Death Clock. You remember that
oh,
cartoon?
sure, yeah, yeah. No, they're great. Yeah, yeah. But I kind of like it, even though I don't follow the music because it's like, okay, you're being intentionally being so obscure that only the real fans or the true heads or whatever are going to understand. It's like, well, that's kind of cool,
Yeah.
It's
I
just
have yeah, there's something
it,
cool
it
about people that make music like that where it's like because everybody just accepts music at face value. And I think we talked about like before like Kurt Cobain and how he blatantly said, he's like in the words to the song, like he was, basically making fun of people that only knew the words to the song. And guess what? Everybody learned the words to the song and it was catchy and they sang along with it and they still did not get the fucking message of
yeah,
like, that he was being cheeky. Like,
yeah. I don't even understand that because I I could not stand Nirvana. So,
well,
yeah, it's
again, it
like,
goes back
yeah.
to that might not be for this person. I always
Oh
try to
no, I
keep
know.
that
No, it's all
attitude, like something for everybody.
any of this stuff when it comes up, if anybody starts to get upset, it's like it's all taste, and I don't care
Yeah.
what you listen to. I mean, I don't judge people by their musical taste. It's stupid. It's
Well, I
childish.
mean,
It's childish. I mean, I lived through all the LA hardcore shit and all that, where people would beat you up for the length of your hair and all that. It was
silly.
stupid then. It's stupid now.
Yeah.
It's stupid.
Uh, I think it's cool to shamelessly love whatever you love. If
Yeah,
I'm in the car singing my heart out to Tommy James and the Shondells,
yeah,
that's
yeah.
nobody's business but mine. Okay.
Right, 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 right. Now, I don't, I know it's just me because I'm a writer and I'm curious and everything. I don't understand how people can like stay just listening to one thing for decades anyway. I don't, it
That's
would drive,
boring.
it would make me crazy. So I can't do it, so I'm
Yeah.
very, I'm very anxious about that sort of thing. Most stuff in life I don't really give a shit about, except having enough food and having a place to live. But like just monotony of what stimulates my brain, like I just can't deal with it.
if you could control what it was that was said, or if somebody, say the music industry, stopped tomorrow and there was no music ever again, your band that you have right now, what would you want people to remember the most about you guys, or what would you want to be like synonymous with your name?
Oh, I don't know. Just the people enjoyed it. That's all I can think. So, and if the music industry ends tomorrow, music will continue. I
See,
mean,
I love that you answered like that.
people that
Everybody kind of takes that and
people that panic about Spotify or streaming or this or that, it's like, well, what are you talking about? If you're in this to make money, good luck, and if you do, good for you. But I never have, and I mean, we get paid, but when we play a show, but
uh,
I haven't ever come close to making money that where I could pay rent or buy a car or anything like that. So
right.
I don't really care about that stuff. It's irrelevant. And yeah, I mean, people made music before you could record it. People will make music if you can't record it. I mean, again, for some reason, if there's some sci-fi dystopian, you know, shock wave that destroys electricity, or I don't know, people will still be banging on rocks or playing whatever they can make, or
I love that.
just singing, or what it's
Yeah.
that's something. I mean, if you think about it, music is very odd because it's like it's totally unnecessary, but yet it's like seems to be built into human beings. I mean, I guess it's like language. I mean, because like why did I don't know. Why do humans talk and nobody else does? It's like, well, I don't know. It's very peculiar. I mean, human consciousness is strange, and for some reason, almost everybody. I've heard of people supposedly don't like music, which I don't quite believe completely. You know,
When people say that to me, I don't believe them, because I know that they always end up saying, "Oh, I like that song," and I'm like, "Thought you didn't
right,
like
right.
it."
Well, that's all it takes. I mean, you may not be immersed in music. Most people aren't,
I
but of
think that's
course,
what they mean, but people aren't always great with
yeah,
words.
yeah. So yeah,
We can't all be Lester Bangs.
right, right. So
What's
yeah,
some of the best advice that you've ever gotten? Because I mean, obviously, you've met a lot of really cool people, and you've
yeah.
probably gotten a lot of advice.
I don't think I have gotten lots of advice. The people I tend to be around don't advise each other necessarily. I don't think that's the word. But I mean, I got asked this question on that podcast we were talking about earlier, and I wish I could. Jonathan, is that
Top liver, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Sorry, man, if you're watching this. My brain is not good. But I said it on there too, and it was like, and it just popped in my head. And it was like when I was first moving to LA, Richard Meltzer, who's a writer that I admire quite a bit, uh, uh, I'd already been out there like once, and it had not worked out, and I moved back to Alabama, and he was aware of all of that. Um, and he was like, "Why are you moving back here, man? Like, move anywhere. Move to Austin. Move to Memphis. Move to New York City." It's like the only reason I left there is because like I'd used up the city. It's like, don't move out here. It's going to eat you alive for real this time. And it didn't. And the first, I had a good period out there, but like, it's a horrible place. it's it's just in like a day-to-day reality sort of thing, except for the weather. It's a hard. It's soulless. It's like too big. It's hard to connect. There's no real culture. I mean, there is, but it's just, oh my God, it will eat you alive, as he tried to warn me. And he moved out of there like 25 years ago or so, or more himself. So I mean, it's anyway. That was some good advice that I did not heed, that I got from somebody I liked a lot. I remember when I saw him like after a few years, ran into him somewhere, and was like, so what do you think now? Do you still like LA? And it's like, yeah, I mean, it's not as good as it was, but
That's funny.
yeah, yeah.
Like,
So
maybe not.
yeah, yeah. It's I don't know. It's a very strange place. I think it's sad. what it is, what it's become. I mean, it was always a strange kind of soulless place, but there was fun and there was a lot of stuff going on. Now I don't know if there's fun or a lot of stuff going on. I mean, 'cause
I've never been.
and so many people have left, I mean, especially during the pandemic, so many people left there, and it's like, yeah, good. I mean, it was bad enough here in Bloomington. I mean, I can just only imagine out there. I mean, it's,
Yeah.
you have to carry around a card to go in a club, and it's like, oh my God, it's like it almost seems like a different time, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Just 4 years ago, it's like, geez, Louise, yeah.
It does, and then the part that always lives in my mind is the effort that they made us all go through to get the cards, only to turn around and never ask for them at most places.
Here they did for about a year.
Yeah?
Yeah, most if you went into a club, they would ask to see your COVID card, yeah.
Maybe I just didn't do enough things.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I started going out as soon as I could because I was going crazy. It screwed me up, man. I'm sure lots of people, it's like
Yeah.
I'm still dealing with, like, trying not to drink myself to death, so and that
Yeah.
developed during that period, and it was like, "Oh my god," it's like and then when things kind of pick back up here, like I was saying earlier, the scene is not what it was. So it's just I'm not, you know, I don't have a car, so it's hard to go out anyway. But there's not much reason to go out. I mean, it's just it kind of sucks. And I'm going to have to move at the this summer because my lease is up and they're tearing down this house I'm in. So I am thinking about maybe moving to Indy if I can figure it out. Just because there's more going on. If
Yeah.
nothing else, just going to State Street. I mean, I'm pretty good friends with Mark Tester, and I love all the people around that scene. And
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Well, and State Street's right down the street from, like, Fountain Square, and Fountain Square is really up and coming right now, I feel like, with a lot of artists. That's where I think of, like, when I think of, where I would wanna be in the city to try to find, newer music. And then a lot of them live there too, so, that's I actually
yeah,
grew up there, but it wasn't a good neighborhood then.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I've
But
lived in
yeah.
bad neighbor. Well, I mean that is one thing I'm reluctant about because I after moving out of LA, I was like, I'm never going to live in a big city again. And I was like, well, Indy is a big city with a lot of the big city problems, including it's just so big, everything's far apart. So
Yeah.
it's one of the things I like about this place is like it's a small enough city. It's not that hard to get around even without a car, and there's not much craziness here. You know,
Yeah,
so
that's
far,
fair.
so far.
Pretty quiet.
They're doing their best to ruin this place, but so far it's okay. Just overbuilding. Just they. I mean, I don't know. They just everybody thinks they want to be in some huge city, and it's like you really don't, man. It's like that's part of the beauty of this place is like it's small. It's small, but it has culture because of the university. It's like
Sure.
a lot of college towns are like this. You know,
Yeah,
but if they get too big, then they just kind of suck like everywhere else. So yeah.
that's
But
fair.
that's why I do music and smoke pot and try to not deal with this shit.
Yeah. So, when can we catch you in Indy again?
I haven't the slightest idea.
That's
We
fair.
we play whenever something comes up. I don't really set up shows much these days because it's just kind of I don't know. I just feel like I end up like kind of doing the same thing over and over and over in the same places. So I tend to wait until somebody asks me to do something, and I never really turn anything down that I can think of. Our most recent show was a couple weeks ago at a record store here in Bloomington.
Nice.
I had just gone in there, and it was like, and I was talking to the guy, and it's like, oh, you guys do shows? It's like, yeah, okay, that sounds like fun. See, I'd rather do that than just play at a club I've already played at 10 times. The clubs are great. I have nothing against them, but it's like, okay, here, it's a new situation. So it's going to be something different. Um, yeah. So, but I don't know when we're playing again. I do have some stuff. this probably is not going to mean anything locally at any point, but we have a new album coming out in February.
Nice.
That it's sort of the second Heavy Mother album, and it's sort of not. It's going to be called Heavy Mother 2, like the Roman numeral 2. And that's both like as a title, but it's also the project because it's all of Heavy Mother plus Joe Shimandi, who is in a Canadian band called the Retail Simps.
Okay.
Craig Bell, who is an indie and is a legend. He was in Rocket from the Tombs and Mirrors and many other things over the years. He's on it, and Jordan Allen is on it, who's a indie person who plays a lot of different improv situations. So it's like a group of us in different combinations, and so we recorded an album last summer, which we will be coming out on Total Punk in February, which is in Portland. And he's flying most of us out there in May to play the second annual Total Punk corporate retreat, which is his Goner Fest or whatever. So
That's crazy. A corporate retreat for
yeah,
punk.
yeah. It was like when I saw that last year, it's like, what the hell does that mean? And it's like, it's just his fest, you know.
That's funny.
It's just yeah. So anyway, I'm looking forward to that. I don't know, I don't know. We have done a couple of Heavy Mother two shows here, just different material and slightly different people, but not with Joe because he lives in Ottawa. So he was yeah.
Okay.
So anyway, so that's coming up. I like that. I like that it's like a totally different thing from our first album, but some of the same people, and it's not. Some of it's kind of a different direction. There's like some just free improv on it and some weird covers, and then we go Heavy Mother itself. We're going to try to record next month, and for a third album or a second album, depending on if you consider Heavy Mother 2 a separate band or not. Which I would be happy if everybody would consider it both. Um,
Okay.
so anyway, and I'm looking forward to that because I want to, you know, do something even slightly different from that. And see, this has always been my goal musically is like not to repeat myself. To
Sure.
try to each little step is like a bit of a progression or a regression, or at least it's not the same thing again.
Oh, that's awesome though.
But yeah, I
Well,
mean, hopefully we'll get up to indie again in the near future. I mean, so
well,
I don't know.
I know that we have several Nouveau Presents shows that we're going to be booking in the next year, so we might be having to contact you.
Hit me up. I mean, we will do it if everybody's available. I don't see why not.
Uh,
I'm up for almost anything, so
Exciting.
right on.
You're awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Amanda.
Yeah, it was super nice to meet you.
Yeah, you too. All right.
All right.
Okay,
Groovy.
cool. Later.
Talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye.